What's going on, everyone? Today we are talking top 12 Dynasty wide receivers so you guys can get a gauge of exactly where these wide receivers are going in Dynasty startups. And if you want to gauge some trade value, you could do that as well. Before we get into it, if you guys could, go down and give this video a like. I'm answering every single comment, so you guys have any questions related to fantasy football, please let me know. And subscribe to the channel. It is the #1 way to support me. It's totally free. You'd always change your mind later. It would mean the absolute world to me, guys. Be sure you stick around to the end of the video as well. I will have some hot takes coming out, as well as a little bonus for you guys at the end of the video. Either way, let's hop right into it with our first two players. I'm going to address both of them at once. It's Jamarr Chase. It's Justin Jefferson. I do have Justin Jefferson ahead of Jamarr Chase simply because the talent is a little bit better with Justin Jefferson. I mean, we just saw Justin Jefferson have 1,800 yards this last season in his third NFL season. I mean, are you kidding me? Addison coming over to the team. Well, it does worry me maybe a tiny bit. Maybe his target share, maybe Justin Jefferson's target share goes down from 30% to 28%. I think that is absolutely fine. You probably will see a bump in efficiency from that, if anything. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 1. The only question mark is long-term Kirk Cousins. Vikings fans do not like Kirk Cousins. Although Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback, they feel he's not going to be able to get them over the hump. And if that's the case, they may move on from him. And we could see a little dip in Justin Jefferson's production if that is the case. Next up, we got Jamarr Chase. And Jamarr Chase, another great wide receiver in his own right, does have a little bit more stability at the quarterback position with Joe Burrow. That's the only reason you could really justify having Jamarr Chase over Justin Jefferson. But Jamarr Chase, a top 12 wide receiver last year despite missing 5 games, which is great at the position. He does have home run ability. Somebody who could take a slant to the house, which I think is great for a guy like Jamarr Chase. He does have a little bit more bust potential on any given week, which is a little scary, I guess, but his boom potential is 50 points and you just winning your week outright because of it. Jamarr Chase, another great player. Don't really have to talk about him too much. Just a phenomenal player in his own right. Really no knocks on the profile. Next up, I do have Ceedee Lamb, and there are two guys below him that if you want to have above him, I am absolutely fine with that. This tier is really just splitting hairs. It's what you prefer in a wide receiver. For me, I do have Ceedee Lamb here at 3, simply because I love the way Ceedee Lamb plays as a wide receiver. His quarterback is very good, and he has built rapport. And there's really not much competition in this offense. I mean, last year we saw Ceedee Lamb have over 1,300 yards, despite the fact that Cooper Rush was playing quarterback for 5 games this season. We saw Dak for 12 games, and Ceedee Lamb was on 1,500-yard pace. Ceedee Lamb, a phenomenal wide receiver in his own right. Somebody who has the draft capital that we like to see, has the talent that we like to see, and I just love watching Ceedee Lamb. Despite being a Giants fan, I hate when he plays the Giants, but his ability to separate from the defense is something I've seen from very few wide receivers. That's why I do have him 3. I'm taking a long-term bet on talent, taking a long-term bet on this offense. The Cowboys always figure out how to produce great fantasy options. Ceedee Lamb is no different. Next up, I have Garrett Wilson, and again, I could understand if you want to put A.J. Brown here, or A.J. Brown even above Ceedee Lamb. The reason why I do have Garrett Wilson here, despite a little bit of uncertainty at quarterback for the long term, is because Garrett Wilson's talent is insane. Having 1,100 yards your rookie season is something that very few wide receivers are able to do. And now for the next 2 years, you are attached to a 4-time MVP quarterback 2 times in the last 3 seasons. He's going to be great. When he wasn't with Zach Wilson, he was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL already coming out as a rookie. When Mike White was throwing him the ball, when Wash Joe Flacco was throwing him the ball. Now that you have Aaron Rodgers, a much more intelligent quarterback than both of those two guys, I think Garrett Wilson will explode onto the scene for the next few years. And even when Aaron Rodgers retires, it's not like Garrett Wilson's talent's just going to vanish, you know? He's still going to be a great wide receiver in his own right, and that's why I do have Garrett Wilson here as my number 4 wide receiver. Number 5 is A.J. Brown, and again, I can understand having A.J. Brown as high as 3. I just think A.J. Brown is 5 because he is a full 3 years older than Garrett Wilson. So generally speaking, I'll take the younger talent where I can. But A.J. Brown had a true breakout this last season. Not saying he wasn't good beforehand, but 1,500 yards and I believe, 13 touchdowns? I mean, this is a wide receiver season of the ages. The only question marks you really have with A.J. Brown long term is DeVonta Smith going to take a bigger piece of this pie? He really only had 21% of the team's target share last season. Now we could see him take a little bit more, go from 21 to about 24, 25%. And you do have Dallas Goedert coming back as well. Again, Dallas Goedert did not play the full season last season. So we could see Dallas Goedert eat into A.J. Brown's targets a little bit. And if that's the case, I'm not really too worried about it. But we could see a little bit of regression from A.J. Brown from around 1,500 yards to probably around 1,350, which is still absolutely fine. Don't get me wrong at the position. I think we saw the ceiling of A.J. Brown last season, and I don't want to bet against him. He's a phenomenal wide receiver, but I would just rather have these two other guys slightly. Moving on, I debated having this guy in a tier of his own, decided against it, decided to put him in this tier. We do have Jaylen Waddle, and Jaylen Waddle, despite not being the wide receiver one in his offense that does go to Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle's 24 years old. Tyreek Hill is almost 30. I'll take the 5-year age difference between these two players. And Jaylen Waddle has done nothing but succeed at the NFL level since he's came into the NFL. I mean, in his rookie season, having over 100 receptions, very few wide receivers are ever able to eclipse 100 receptions in a season, much less do it in their rookie season. And then this past season, only 117 targets, but the most efficient wide receiver on a per-catch basis, averaging 18.1 yards per catch. And this is somebody who last year only had 10 yards per catch. The ability for Tyreek Hill to open up this offense for Jaylen Waddle is phenomenal. And while Jaylen Waddle's target share is similar to a guy like DeVonta Smith, I think we should only see that go up, especially with the fact that Tua could easily play a full season next season, which would be, again, great for Jaylen Waddle. Either way, in my opinion, Jaylen Waddle does deserve to be in this tier, having over 1,350 yards last season. And while the efficiency probably will go down, I imagine he doesn't have 18 yards per catch again. If he does level out to somewhere around 14 or 15, but gets an increase in targets, which he absolutely should, that will be absolutely fine from Jaylen Waddle. I don't think he has the potential to be the wide receiver one on any given season, but I think he has top 5 wide receiver potential year in and year out. And in Dynasty, you're going to take that any day of the week. Next up, I have Chris Olave, and if Chris Olave didn't miss 2 games to a concussion, we would probably be talking about him a lot closer to a guy like Garrett Wilson than I think a lot of people would think. I mean, first of all, Chris Olave was able to have over 1,000 yards with Andy Dalton throwing him the ball. You are getting a pretty massive upgrade in Derek Carr, and while Derek Carr, not a top 10 QB by any stretch of the imagination, has supported phenomenal wide receivers in years past. I mean, look at Davante Adams last year, look at Darren Waller a couple of years back, look at Hunter Renfrow. He's been able to support great wide receivers. Chris Olave should be no different in this offense, especially as he's able to develop rapport with Derek Carr over the next 3 seasons. I think Chris Olave, a great player. Every time I go watch his tape, I forget just how good he is. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy is amazing. Well, again, I don't think he has the wide receiver 1 upside. I think he has the ability to finish as the wide receiver 6 on any given season. And at this range, with his age being what it is at 22 years old, I think it's great production from Chris Olave for his age. And it puts him as an elite producer among all wide receivers. He should be a great fantasy asset for years to come. Next up, we have DeVonta Smith. And I was debating having DeVonta Smith or Amon-Ra St. Brown here. I really was. But I'm giving the nod to DeVonta Smith simply because their first 2 seasons were so similar. But the thing is, DeVonta Smith has the draft capital, and Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't. Amon-Ra St. Brown arguably has the higher ceiling here. I think his peak is just a little bit higher, but DeVonta Smith's floor is one of the best wide receivers in football. I think he's already proven that over the first 2 seasons. And during the back half of last season, DeVonta Smith finished as the wide receiver 4 ahead of teammate A.J. Brown, which is another reason why I have A.J. Brown a bit lower on this list. But I have faith that DeVonta Smith is going to be a top 10 wide receiver this season, as he did finish this last season as the wide receiver 9. I love DeVonta Smith. I think every time I watch him, I'm just consistently amazed by his ability to get open, his ability to separate at the line of scrimmage, especially being as small as he is. That's why I love DeVonta Smith, and I have to have him over Amon-Ra St. Brown. Even though it's painful having Amon-Ra St. Brown this low, this is where I have him right ahead of T. Higgins. Amon-Ra St. Brown, still a great player in his own right, somebody who could have finished as a top 5 wide receiver this past season. Had he not gotten injured, he was looking to have an all-time Cooper Kupp level breakout this past season before injury. And had he not gotten injured, maybe we'd be talking about him in a different light. Either way, though, we do have Amon-Ra here. And Amon-Ra is somebody you really can't go wrong with in your offense. And Amon-Ra probably does have the wide receiver 1 ceiling, that Cooper Kupp level type of ceiling, if everything lines up for him. This wide receiving core, although you do have Jameson Williams here, is sort of wide open. Other than that, I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is probably arguably the wide receiver 3 in this offense at this current moment. So I do like Amon-Ra St. Brown, a very efficient wide receiver as well, ranking top 10 in yards per route run, despite being a year 2 wide receiver drafted in round 4, which I think is absolutely crazy. I feel like I should have Amon-Ra St. Brown higher. I mean, these 3 guys are so tough to decide between. I mean, I flip a coin one day, it's Davante. I flip a coin the next, it's Amon-Ra. Either way, you can't really go wrong with any of these guys. Next up, I do have Higgins, and I do have Higgins below these 3 guys, which is painful for me because I have T. Higgins in my main Dynasty League. But I won't let bias overtake me. I think T. Higgins, well, a phenomenal wide receiver, somebody who is a big body type of wide receiver. I think the difference between T. Higgins and the rest of these guys is that T. Higgins will most likely never be able to have a 30% target share in this offense unless he goes to a different one, simply because Jamarr Chase is so dominant as a wide receiver. And I guess you could say the same thing about A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, but I think Jamarr Chase is a tier above as a wide receiver from A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown might cede volume to DeVonta Smith next year, whereas there's no way Jamarr Chase is ceding volume to T. Higgins. That's why I do have T. Higgins a little bit lower than the rest of these guys. I mean, again, very small gripes with these players. I am splitting hairs here, but T. Higgins, still a great wide receiver. I think pretty much the best wide receiver 2 you can have in Dynasty, and that's why I do have him ranked here. Either way, though, let's move on to my next tier, and it starts with Drake London. And I could see the case for Drake London being lower than this, sure. He only had 800 yards his rookie year. The situation in this offense is not that great, but Drake London had 800 yards, despite the fact that Marcus Mariota, a washed quarterback, a terrible quarterback, was throwing him the ball. And then Desmond Ridder came in and threw 2 touchdowns in 4 games, throwing Drake London the ball. I mean, I was watching Desmond Ridder highlights recently, don't ask me why, and every time I was just amazed, not by Desmond Ridder, although Desmond Ridder did throw some pretty good balls, but by Drake London. Drake London, such a talented player, and although the situation might never work out for him, I think this is a talent buy over a situation buy. Absolutely go out there and get Drake London if a manager is looking to sell him cheap. I think he's a great buy right now. I have him ranked slightly ahead of ADP, and this is somebody who's only 21 years old. I mean, think about it. He came into the NFL literally a full year younger than Garrett Wilson. I think Drake London, a phenomenal player, somebody who deserves to be where he is. And that's why I do have him here. Now my next 2 players are my last 2, and this is a bonus because I am going a little bit over. Promised 12, gave 13. We got JSN and we have DK Metcalf, and it is hard to choose between these 2 wide receivers, right? I think DK Metcalf probably the better talent right now, but Jackson Smith and Jigba does have a full 4 years on DK Metcalf, which is why I am going to give the nod to JSN. JSN, a wide receiver who could peak somewhere between 160 and 180 targets at the NFL level. Well, he will have to compete with DK for targets in this offense. I think that is absolutely fine because this offense should be pretty above average. I mean, you have Pete Carroll, a historically great play caller in this offense. You have an offensive line that is looking up a ton, and then the rest of these offensive pieces are great. You have Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker in the backfield. Geno Smith had a career year last year. DK Metcalf, a great wide receiver. Tyler Lockett, a great wide receiver. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, another great wide receiver. Well, the targets this next season might not be as high for both DK and Jackson Smith and Jigba. The efficiency should be through the roof in this offense. That's why I do have these players ranked at 12 and 13. And if you guys are wondering, where's Tyreek Hill? Where's Davante Adams? Where's Stefon Diggs? The reason why I don't have them on a list like this is because although they are outproducing most of these players on this list, they are going to be hitting a wall rather soon. I mean, once you hit 31, 32 years old as an NFL wide receiver, it's really hard to produce at a great level. Look at Julio Jones. Either way, though, guys, that's going to be it from me. Hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, go smash that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It is the #1 way to support me. It's totally free. You can always change your mind later. With that, though, guys, as always, have a good day, a good night, and a good life.